Well, good morning, everybody. For those who don't remember me or know me, my name is Kevin Law, head up the LIA here. Thank you so much for coming to our seventh event of this month. We've been on a roll with some really great events, but none more exciting than the one we have planned for you today. But I will give a plug to a couple of other events that we're doing over the next 3 weeks that you may find interesting. First, our spring luncheon is our fall luncheon next Friday is with Nikki Haley. Some have said she's going to become, could be the next president, perhaps sooner than we think. But that's on Friday. But more relevant to this crowd, I think, is, and I said this at last week's event, for the first time ever, on October 8th, we have the Chief Judge of the New York Court of Appeals, Janet DiFiore, coming. Will be here in this room. And she has this really interesting, big vision for changing the entire court system throughout the entire state of New York. So whether you're an attorney or not, you'll find her really fascinating. And then also in November, we have an event on the Gateway Tunnel, another big project that's critically important to the region. And Matt, what date is the Gateway Tunnel project?
October 22nd.
October 22nd, here in this room. And so, but really excited about our program today. Something I also mentioned last week, 2 weeks ago, I started my 10th year here at the LIA, and it's been a real fun ride. But one of the things that I will certainly always look back at as one of the coolest and neatest initiatives, projects, or programs that I was involved with over the last 10 years was the entire third track process. And so it really was. It's fascinating and really neat to play a small role in it. And we're going to hear a lot of exciting memories of that process today. And we're going to hear a terrific update of the project that's actually moving forward today. And so without any further ado, I am going to introduce somebody I became close with, a dear friend, about 10 years ago. And that's Nancy Rauch. She is a lifelong Long Islander. She attended Smith College and received a Ph.D. in community psychology from NYU. After her initial career as a psychologist, she became president of the Rauch Foundation and has overseen more than $60 million distributed in grants, much of that directed to programs on Long Island. That's worthy of a big round of applause. And a significant part of that money went to the creation and the funding for the Long Island Index that Nancy created, which was a terrific project over a 15-year period here for Long Island, and it really helped lay the groundwork for why we're here today and celebrating the success of this project. Nancy and her husband Costas live in Lloyd Harbor and in New York City, and let's give a big round of applause to Nancy DeZinas.
Thank you, Kevin. We get set here. And thank all of you in the audience for coming this morning. I believe that this is an important meeting for all of us who live and work on Long Island. But before I get started, I'd like to ask the Long Island Advisory Committee, the members who've been working with us for some of them more than 15 years, who are in the audience, to please stand up and to get a nice round of applause. These are the people who, some of them for 15 years, worked together with a team at the Rauch Foundation to produce the Long Island Index. And our deepest appreciation to all of you. Now, the question is, that many of you might be asking this morning, is why did we at Rauch, in fact, do this case study of the third track? And I have to say that the idea came from Bruce Stillman, the president of the Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory. And Bruce was with us since 2003, was all 15 years on the Index Advisory Committee. And Dave Capella and I were having a meeting with him, and he said, maybe you should really do a study, an investigation of why the third track project ended up becoming reality. Maybe we can learn from that. And Bruce wanted us to figure out how and why did this work after so many years of failure. And when so many other big projects have failed, why did this one really work? He actually went further, and he asked, would some kind of standing Long Island Advisory Committee be worth establishing? And if so, could such a committee initiate larger, targeted research on critical regional issues that could then help guide policy? Because if there's one place that Long Island's really lagging, it's in working as a region. We know that. Now, I always listen carefully to Bruce. And we on the Rauch team decided then and there that we would investigate and do a research project, the one we're presenting today, a case study of the third track. Other than the Long Island Pine Barrens Preservation Act of 1993, which preserved 100,000 acres of land, the third track project represents the most important regional project on Long Island in recent times. It's a breakthrough for the needs of the region over the previously all-powerful NIMBYism. It is a victory for good government and the common good. Now, Ann Golub, the former Long Island Index director and currently a consultant to the Rauch Foundation, managed and oversaw this project. And early on, she determined that an investigator reporter was the best way to do this study. Ann interviewed many people, but soon decided that the best candidate was somebody we already knew and worked with on other projects. This journalist was Liz Moore. We had gotten to know Liz's work when she wrote the much-lauded and superb 8-day series on Long Island's volunteer fire departments. You will soon be hearing directly from Liz. She took the assignment we gave her and ran with it. She decided also that she had to go back to the beginning days of the Long Island Railroad to really understand what had happened and why it took so long for the third track to be approved. Many of us who thought we knew all about the history learned a lot, and I think you will too. Liz, together with Ann Golub's oversight, produced the excellent report that you will be receiving a copy of this morning. And now, without further ado, I have the pleasure of introducing Elizabeth Moore, the very talented journalist who investigated and wrote the third track study. Thank you.
Good morning, all of you. I first need to start by thanking Nancy Rauch for her trust and support, and as she said, turning me loose on this project, and I'm really sorry that Ann Golub, who edited it, can't be here. She was just terrific and very smart in the way she approached it. And of course, I need to thank so many people in this room. You can go down the line of the folks at that table and a number of you out there, including Kevin, of course, and Dave. It's really your story, and I want to thank you for telling it to me. When you get your copy of the report, you'll get a much better image of what's on the screen here. I love this picture. The Public Service Commission went around the state and took lots and lots of pictures of every grade crossing in New York, and this one was taken in 1941. If you get a closer look, what you'll see is it's mostly farm fields, but there are a few suburban homes going up along the horizon. And of course, this is at New Hyde Park. And also in the picture is a billboard advertising 6 acres of commercial and industrial land, which is, of course, right in the middle of a pasture. And there is, in fact, a piece of industrial commercial property there now. So the question that I was really asked, of course, was how did the Long Island Railroad succeed in pushing through this $2.6 billion third track project after so many previous efforts had failed? How was this big project set in motion on Long Island, which, as we know, is generally known as the place where big ideas come to die? So here's another picture I like. I'm sorry. This is New Hyde Park. That was Mineola, Herrick's Road in Mineola. Forgive me. This is New Hyde Park in 1918. Anywhere else, and think about what it would have taken to put a third track in. And in fact, if you look closer in that picture, you see there are 3 tracks. We think that picture is of a freight spur. That was the best we were able to work out. So, even before Penn Station opened in 1910, the Long Island Railroad's owners did anticipate that there would be an explosion in ridership. I'm not sure if they realized it would soon become the busiest commuter railroad in America. But they had plenty of land back then to do what they needed to do to take care of that. Here's New Hyde Park in 1988. It wasn't long before the Long Island Railroad became so busy that with only 2 tracks on the main line between Floral Park and Hicksville, pretty soon there was only room to send trains in one direction during rush hour, as this picture shows. You can see. This is going to Oyster Bay, I think, and this one's going on, one or the other. One's going to Oyster Bay, one's going to Hicksville. Helena could maybe enlighten us. Okay. Okay, there you go. So by 1949, as that little headline from Newsday notes, the problem was so pressing that a special commission called for immediate action to install a third track. And of course, grade crossing fatalities have been a source of heartbreak for generations on Long Island. Here's another picture I like. This is a picture of Carl Place in 1951. Again, so much of Long Island was farm fields back then. But the railroad almost always ran at a deficit, mainly because they couldn't carry much freight, because we didn't have a tunnel for the tracks. That's another story. And it was also putting its money back then into Brooklyn and Queens, that's where the first surge in population happened, and that's where they needed to be busiest. There's an interesting story I get into in the report, which I won't spend a lot of time on here, but in 1941, just when plans were in motion to fix some key crossings on the Long Island Railroad, including some of the ones in the project now, funds were available, set aside, and they were ready to go. Robert Moses came along and convinced voters to put that money toward parkways and bridges instead. So it was the age of the automobile, and until the late 1960s, New York's transportation dollars were going to highways, not to transit. So after World War II, those farm fields, of course, became subdivisions filled with residents who cared a great deal about what was built in their backyards. They didn't want an L. That they were sure about. So even as commuters were increasingly frustrated by delays in poor service, and despite a 9-fatality accident in 1982 that earned Mineola's Herrick's Road the distinction of the most dangerous crossing in America, residents were determined to protect their little patch of suburban heaven against the railroad's proposals to elevate the main line and add a third track. So for decades, we had a standoff. The economic and human cost of inaction was rising, but the dollar cost and the political cost of doing the work was rising too, just as fast. Literally generations of neighborhood activists and elected officials cut their political teeth fighting the Long Island Railroad in Mineola and and around that part of Nassau County. So it all came to a head in 2005, as many people in this room recall, when the MTA rolled out a capital plan that included a little over $200 million for the work and started environmental hearings on a third track. By this point, the Long Island Association and others had been really a broken record on this topic, urging the construction of a third track to help the regional economy. And it fit well in the increasing popularity of ideas like smart growth and transit-oriented development. Oh, thank you. But hundreds and hundreds of local residents crowded into the hearing rooms, and they were focused instead on the unknown but really big number of homes that the railroad said it might need to take under the plan. People were livid. One transit advocate said this was the first hearing where she found herself being booed by 10-year-olds. And those hearings set the narrative for the media that this was another case of arrogant big government trying to walk all over the little guy. So elected officials backed off. Former State Senator Dean Scalos, for example, the majority leader, had been a supporter of the third track, but he reversed himself and used the Senate's veto power in the Capital Projects Review Board to block funding. Environmental hearings dragged on for a few years. Helena Williams, who is sitting here today, was brought in to head the railroad and tried to establish a dialogue with local officials and modify the plans to be less invasive, but budget pressures drove the MTA to postpone the project, and intense public opposition drove it to remove the third track from the capital plan altogether. Now, Helena quietly continued doing projects along the main line that she called her stealth third track work, like this piece of the third track to nowhere that was built into the replacement for the Post Avenue Bridge in Westbury, I think that is. But politically, the third track was declared dead. It was untouchable. So when a vitally needed improvement project is declared politically dead, that's when non-political actors may have the most to contribute in bringing people together around areas of common concern. The Rauch Foundation, which, as I think most of you know, is a Long Island-based family foundation established with an auto parts fortune that was earned here. The Rauch Foundation had been looking for places where their philanthropy could have the most benefit. And in 2004, the Rauch founded the Long Island Index Foundation to study the region's quality of life and quickly understood how central the Long Island Railroad was in that picture. In 2013, the Long Island Index commissioned a report by the RPA how the Long Island Railroad could shape the next economy, with improvements like a third track, quicker commutes, easier access to jobs, boosted home values, and less congestion and pollution. It followed up with an economic analysis that concluded a third track would add $5.6 billion to the region's economy, as well as 14,000 jobs and 35,000 residents because of the power of reverse commutes. $5.6 billion is the kind of number that does tend to get attention. Nancy then asked Greenport's former mayor, David Capel, to convene something called a fast-track task force to brainstorm ways to try to shift public opinion on it. The Long Island Association had been a major supporter of this work, and its president, Kevin Law, and Dave Capel began running the task force meetings together. These meetings proved to be a valuable way of building support among leaders in different sectors of Long Island's business, academic, and healthcare sectors. And Newsday's editorial page had become a strong supporter of the third track. But they were getting nowhere with key elected officials. Until December 2015, that is. That month, Kevin Law and Dave Capel attended a ceremony in Albany of the Regional Economic Development Councils, hosted by the governor. At this routine reception, Capel buttonholed the governor, gave him his elevator speech about the project, and whatever it was he said. Within a few minutes, Capel had enlisted Cuomo's active interest in leading the completion of the third track project. From that moment on, everything has moved so quickly that it seems to be inevitable in retrospect, but it's worth remembering that when Cuomo announced his support for the third track at a Long Island Association breakfast in January 2016, a key state senator declared the idea dead on arrival. Cuomo had been warned by Kevin that this project faced entrenched, organized, and passionate opposition from local mayors and civic groups, and unyielding opposition from key senators. and a negative storyline was baked into the local media coverage. If he was going to change that narrative, Cuomo told Law he was going to need a broad and robust demonstration of grassroots support that would have his back. Cuomo had his staff, so with the backing of their organizations, Kevin and Dave announced the formation of an entity called the Right Track for Long Island Coalition to help educate the public and systematically build support for the effort. They were joined almost immediately by the New York State Laborers Union, and those three entities made an informal partnership that pooled their expertise and resources on a campaign that ultimately cost somewhere in the high six figures. The Association for a Better Long Island later contributed as well. Cuomo had his staff study the lessons of the 2005 plan. I don't know if you can see it on the screen, so I'll just tell you. He made 4 key changes that fundamentally redefined the project. First, he leaned hard on the railroad, as we know only he can do, until they figured out a way to add a third track without taking any residential property. Second, he incorporated 8, depending on how you count them, grade crossing eliminations that residents had been asking for since the 1930s, but he made it a package deal. Third, he opted out of federal funding. This, to me, is the most interesting because it gave the MTA control of the schedule and the environmental review process timetable. And it allowed the MTA to use design-build procurement, which is much faster and less vulnerable to challenge. Fourth, Cuomo promised what he called an unprecedented level of outreach, appointing a team on the ground that included experienced operatives like Lisa Black, now a deputy Suffolk County executive, and John McCarthy, to make sure no complaint or concern went unaddressed. So it's a complicated story. We'll just say that what followed was 18 months of flooding the zone, phone calls, emails, and meetings large and small by the Right Track for Long Island Coalition, the governor's team, and representatives of the railroad and MTA. Lisa Black calls that period, as I said, a lot of coffee and a lot of beer. But what those conversations ended up generating about $800 million worth of concessions that would finally make this project palatable to the communities along the tracks. At the same time, all the organizing done by the Right Track Coalition was paying off in a dramatically different tone in public hearings. For the first time, instead of a long parade of angry critics at the microphone, screaming 10-year-olds, you had meetings in which supporters matched or outnumbered the critics. And those supporters included leading names in business, the health sector, academia, elected officials who had come to realize that this wasn't going to happen without their active help. By the time it was over, the coalition could claim to speak for about 2 million of Long Island's 2.8 million residents. Still, even after all those concessions were made and the mainline mayors finally agreed to support the project, the 2 local state senators continued to oppose it. It looked as if the clock was going to run out on the funding proposal, so the MTA withdrew the plan and resubmitted it. But the Senate's majority leader, Republican John Flanagan, had realized that Long Island's Republican caucus could no longer operate by its old rules, where individual senators had veto power over projects of regional importance. After a few more weeks behind closed doors, I don't know what they said in there, but he gave it the go-ahead. All right. So Jano Lieber is going to tell us a lot more about the whirlwind of work now underway and scheduled for completion still in December 2022. But the unprecedented level of outreach that was promised to residents can easily be seen by anybody who visits a village website or signs up for email blasts or just lives along the main line, where they are sure to have received at least one knock on the door, if not several, with updates and new information. Now, I don't know, again, if you can see this picture, but I just love it. I've seen a lot of groundbreaking pictures, and I'm sure you all have too, but I don't think I've ever seen such giddy joy on a public official's face as you do in this picture. And the governor looks like a 5-year-old on Christmas morning. And that told me something about, really, the significance of this project. Thanks very much, everyone.
Great job, Liz. 2 weeks ago, we had Pat Dolan, the owner of Newsday, and Debbie Krennic, publisher of Newsday, here to talk about Newsday, over the years and its future, and really exciting. And they talked about their commitment to terrific reporting. And I think Liz Moore is just one part of the evidence of what terrific reporters come out of Newsday, both current and formerly. So a big round of applause for Liz Moore. And really, she did in 15 minutes, just briefly, the report. You got to read it. It's a great story, and it doesn't take a long time to read. I went through it last weekend. It's terrific. You did a great job on it, so thank you very much. Two things. First, because we care about your safety, for some reason, in the last month, 3 people have fell in the pond right behind here because they're like this on their phone, walking right up. Be careful. I kid you not. One guy, 2 women have fallen in the pond, and so just be careful on the way out. And Matt, great job finding the. Dave, you see, I forgot about the Right Track banner that we did, and remember we had this up here a couple of years ago when the governor came down when we launched their campaign, and that banner brings back great memories. So very exciting. And, the governor's support is obviously critical. His funding then became obviously necessary. And then everything turns to execution. So we build up the support, we got the funding, and then things have to be executed. And for those, you probably know, I don't know if it was punishment for dragging him into this whole thing, but the governor, I kid you, the governor recently appointed me to the MTA board, and where I get to work with great people like Jano Lieber. And you just read recently, we just approved a massive capital, 5-year capital plan, and a big part of the discussion on that was, can the MTA do all these major projects throughout the region? Because, execution is difficult. And I'm excited to have you hear from Jano on what's been happening since this whole 70-year saga and what's been happening over the last few years in terms of progress. Jano is really a terrific leader at the MTA. He's the Chief Development Officer. He reports to the chairman. He heads up the real estate department of the MTA as well. But his main priorities and his responsibilities are for all the mega projects. He's overseeing the East Side Access Project. He's overseeing the second phase of the Second Avenue Subway, Metro North Penn Station Access Project, the Canarsie Tunnel Rehabilitation Project, and of course the one most nearest and dearest to us, the Third Track Project. He was served as president of the World Trade Center Properties LLC, worked for the Silverstein Organization's efforts to rebuild the World Trade Center. Really just a terrific can-do guy. Ladies and gentlemen, Jano Lieber.
So, Kevin, thank you for the safety alert. I thought grade crossings were the most dangerous thing about Long Island, but it turns out the pond in the atrium is the most dangerous thing about Long Island. Look, I'm thrilled to be here. I really feel this kind of event, looking backwards at how we got here, makes those of us who have the honor of trying to build this project feel like we are standing on the shoulders of giants, the people, all of you, and so many of you who are specifically named in the report we just heard, who made this project happen against all odds. But we're trying to make good on the historic effort and make sure that the caliber of the execution keeps up with the caliber of what you all set in motion. Just a reminder of why this project matters, and Mitch Pally has probably heard me say this, and Kevin too many times. Simple facts. What do we get? Together with East Side Access, that not beloved but transformational project that is coming in 2022 also, we get 45% more peak hour capacity on the Long Island Railroad, combination of Third Track and East Side Access, and we get 60% more reverse peak capacity. And the inbound is obvious, more trains, more service, more options with Grand Central as well as Penn. The reverse peak service is potentially transformational for Long Island's economy because all of a sudden the Long Island business community can draw on the talent pool from a much bigger pond, if you will. And when I remember a conversation in this room with a gentleman who was one of, if not the leader of Brookhaven National Laboratory, who said to me, every person we want to hire for Brookhaven as a spouse or a partner who lives in the city, who wants to stay in the city, who has a job in the city, and if we can't get them out here reverse commuting, we're not going to be able to attract those caliber of people. And that is one of the reasons, it's not always understood by our brothers and sisters who are the commuters inbound, but outbound is as important. Yesterday I went to the Bronx to work on a public event on the Metro North project, and the Metro North service to the Bronx, from the Bronx to Westchester and Connecticut, is the fastest growing element of the entire regional transportation system, because all those jobs in the suburbs, those dynamic jobs and dynamic businesses in the suburbs, we all know that the manufacturing economy in the region has diminished, and now it's all about knowledge economy jobs, and we have to be able to attract the best talent to make those businesses work all around the region. So I always emphasize that. The other thing that's significant about this project, before I go into it, is what you all set in motion, which is the idea that we can overcome the natural resistance in our communities to big projects if we put together thought leaders, persuasive academics, journalists, environmental activists, labor, and regular folks in a coalition. And that model is one that I think has made an impression on everybody in the region, everybody in the state, because we know we have a ton of work to get the kind of infrastructure we need executed, but we have to build public support for it in an environment where people are justifiably suspicious of the public sector's ability to execute. So you've done something very important apart from the creation of this project. So first of all, Kevin Law, a pleasure to work with on the board, has really become in very short order one of the leaders of the MTA board, and is leading a rapprochement between the Metro North and Long Island Railroad forces, the likes of which could not be imagined even by the folks who negotiated major international treaties. Laura Curran, I always say that it's a treat, for somebody who comes from the city and to see a thought leader, elected leader in one of our suburban communities who talks about transit-oriented development, who talks about the type of transformational relationship between transportation and economic development and a rational plan of housing. And we haven't seen that in a long time, and it's just a treat for me to work with Laura Curran and her team at Nassau County. And I just have to say, there is nobody more fun to work with than Dave Capel. Does everyone agree with me about that?
Tell my wife.
Yeah. And obviously, the Rauch Foundation, Nancy, again, I mentioned thought leadership. That's having the caliber of thinking and argumentation and analysis and leading voices that are respected in communities really is part of the success of this project. So it's been almost a year since we actually got heavy construction underway. Let us tell you what we've been doing with our summer vacation. It's a 10-mile corridor, but there's 50 separate elements. This is a massive project, and the variety of different work is important, not just we're going to get a hell of a lot of work done, but it is symptomatic of something that Kevin has heard me talk a lot about. The way we're going to get that $50 billion capital program done is by finding opportunities to combine what had been historically lots of little separate projects into one well-conceived and coordinated bigger project. That's the only way we can get work done on this scale. And the third track project isn't just about the track. As you can see all along it, it's got power, it's got substations for power, it's got station renovations, It's got bridges, it's got undergrade crossings, and it's got a ton of state of good repair work, the signals, the track, everything is being upgraded. So we're taking advantage of the fact that we have to, do huge impacts on this corridor and get all this work done to do what everybody calls piggybacking. Every time we do a shutdown, we're going to do work all along the corridor, and that's part of the success of this. We're on budget. We're on schedule. I'll talk a little about some of the indicia of that success later. As I said, just a quick list of all the key elements: 8 grade crossings, 7 bridge replacements, modifications, 6 station projects. I mean, there's a ton of different work, as well as the rail infrastructure upgrades, the power substations, and all those retaining walls, which we're going to do 18,000 linear feet. 18,000 linear feet this year, and we're well on schedule to doing that. The reason we're able to accomplish so much in this project is we're actually doing things differently. Liz referenced design build. That's a different and more modern way of doing projects, which combines design and construction. So you eliminate one major step of the process and you take out the conflicts between what's designed and what the builder says is buildable, and you also give the team that is planning the project the ability to design something that can be executed more efficiently. That flexibility is an opportunity to add innovation, and in this project, we actually got some, without getting too technical, some improvements to the alignment by challenging the contractors who are bidding for the job. Come up with a smarter way to do this project. Come up with a faster, cheaper way to do this project. And we got some important improvements out of that process. That's typical of design build, where you can shorten project schedules, identify potential issues earlier because you're thinking about how to build the job from the beginning, and improving accountability because we have, as we say inelegantly in my business, one throat to choke. Instead of having to figure out, who's you guys are arguing, who made a mistake? No, one throat to choke. Bridge replacement. So, as I said, we began full construction a year ago, literally next week. The Cherry Lane Bridge replacement was the first of our big weekend bridge and undergrade crossing projects, and it was done the June 1st and 2nd weekend. It was already a low-hanging bridge. Huge problem in this area with these low bridges that get struck all the time. We did one on Post Avenue even before we started the third track. That was one that Helena planned. But this is a big source of delays because every time a bridge gets struck, they got to stop the railroad, check whether there's been any damage to the structural integrity of the bridge. Even if everybody's on their toes, it takes time and it has impacts to service. So we dealt with that one, and the bridge was done and replaced with a taller 3-track structure at Cherry Lane. Then at South Tyson Avenue in Floral Park on August 17th, 18th, we did another bridge, and we managed to keep the main line. That's really important in service for the weekend. If folks are coming out, I know that there was community concern about impacts and inconvenience, and we're shutting down roadways. So people are but people are coming out to watch this happen, and it's actually become something that I think is kind of exciting. Urban Avenue, which is now up on the screen. I have this clicker so I can advance it. It's one of the 8 street level crossings being eliminated. This is the huge safety issue. On the weekend of July 20th to 21st, we installed the new train bridge. What we were using here, and part of the excitement of this is you're doing new technology, new approaches to construction where the two major things going on. One, we're doing a precast tunnel, in effect, a box, which you then do a certain amount of excavation and you push the box with a jacking structure into place. And so that had never been done in the United States to our knowledge before. So we're using innovation. Also, in order to expedite the project and make sure you keep the schedule and are able to restore service, we're actually doing less excavation, and we're using the construction excavation equivalent of a drone to go in and compress the earth, where otherwise you might have to do more excavation to make sure it was safe structurally. but we're sending in automatic compressors, unmanned compressors to do that, so we can get the bridge jacking process moved more quickly. And the underpass for Urban Avenue was able to open on September 5th. You see the MTA police leading the way, and the roadway was closed for exactly the amount of time that was promised. And I think that is part of building and maintaining credibility with the community, where they'd seen some projects in the past. We were talking a little about some of the DOT projects on Long Island, where the time frames that were promised didn't get achieved. This is, we're in the promises made, promises kept business, and I think that's helping. If you can adjust us, we're on the Covert Avenue slide. This is the Covert Avenue new bridge, same system being jacked into place August 24th, 25th weekend, same approach in terms of technology, service restored, and we're going to reopen that crossing with the undergrade in mid-October. There's another bridge in replacement in progress at Nassau Boulevard. I think many of you have seen it, and the bridge, the new bridge, will be rolled in the weekend of October 5th and 6th. This will be the third bridge completed in a calendar year. When you think back to Post Avenue, that which was in many ways the experience that we base a lot of the procedure here on, we were thrilled to get that one open in a year. So now we're able to compress the timeline. So we're learning, and I hope we're doing it better in terms of impact on the community. Platforms. So the original plan was that we're going to have to close Carl Place and Maryland stations. Lo and behold, as a result of that design-build process, we were able to the contractor came up with a plan for temporary platforms that allowed, even with a shorter platform and obviously fewer cars, being able to open and close, but you're able to maintain service. That is one of the benefits of a well-run design-build project. And throughout the corridor, the stations are being modernized with new platforms, ADA compliance, accessibility improvements, digital information signs, and we've already got construction underway at 3 of the 7 stations, Floral Park, Maryland, and Carl Place. And those 3 will be accessible by the end of 2020 from an ADA standpoint. Long Island Railroad's not perfect on accessibility. It's ahead of where the subway is by a lot. And by the end of the next capital program, we're going to have 97% of our passengers using accessible stations, and that is actually an important milestone that we want to achieve. So the stations and platforms, we've got the Mineola, we've got a couple of garages underway. Mayor Cavallaro is here. Obviously, we're working in Westbury as well. This is the Mineola Harrison parking garage. Again, I don't know that we're going to win any awards for architecture, but it is being built using some innovative precast concrete approaches. We're on schedule, and we're expecting to open next summer. So, and likewise in Westbury, we're well underway. I talked a little about the sound walls. That piece of the job, which was, understandably controversial. These are major new elements visually in the middle of these highly dense, fully developed communities. But there was a lot of dialogue about the design of the sound walls. People started to understand that this could be a benefit, and visually and in terms of noise, block, and make the neighborhood better, even though it obviously is an introduction of a big element. And we're on time with the 18,000 feet for this year, but this remains a critical path item. Part of the success, and I'm going to wrap up in a few minutes, but part of the success of this project is that we're able to model how we want to run jobs here, and it starts with planning. Projects, notwithstanding, the perception, successful projects are made in the office before the boots hit the ground. When you really plan how you're going to, the strategy for running the job, those weekends that are successful, that we've been taking the railroad out of service and rolling in bridges and so on, are all about the planned choreography of construction. And we plan them in 10 or 15-minute increments and aggressively manage to make sure we remain on schedule. And because there's so much choreography of personnel and equipment and process, and you need to make sure you have a plan for every little step of the way. Part of it is aggressively managing our commitments to not to in terms of how we on the owner side, not just the contractor, you got to monitor the contractor, but you have to first start with in a design build process, monitor your own performance. How quickly are we turning around submittals? Contractor, design build team is doing designs, you have to review them, you have to approve them. How quickly is that process going? How is the other information flowing? How quickly are we paying the contractor? This is, maybe it's because I come from private sector background, one of my hobby horses. When you don't pay a contractor, you're turning them into your lender, and they will charge you for it. Maybe not on this project, on the next one, on the next one. So if you pay a contractor faster, you're going to get better performance and you're going to get better pricing. So we monitor aggressively 50 separate indicia, criteria of our success. A lot of them have to do with community commitments. I can't see all the specifics, but you know, as much part of our monitoring of the contractor's construction progress and the project team's role in turning things around, managing and making good on our commitments, we monitor our commitments to the community, environmental commitments, commitments about noise, commitments about traffic, all of those things. And part of that, and we're really proud of this, is that we have made the part of the contractor's bonus contingent on how people who live along the right-of-way rate their performance, which is a revolutionary idea. Everybody said, oh, you're nuts. The contractor's not going to earn anything. They're never going to sign up to do another job. Well, lo and behold, if because we have communicated, I think, effectively with people, contractors got a huge outreach team. We also, on the MTA side, have a significant outreach team. We deal with the 50 separate jurisdictions along this right-of-way, towns, villages, fire districts, police districts, the dog catching district, whatever. You know, Long Island is very government-y. I've noticed that. But we've done a good enough job, and I appreciate what you said before about that really the jurisdictions, the localities, the town meetings, we are present with information, and we actually do knock doors. And there are some cute videos on YouTube of, you know, construction workers in full, you know, Carhartt regalia with the heavy boots arriving at the door of people along the right-of-way with flowers and mums and stuff. So we're going to win hearts and minds, but the result is the contractors have gotten kind of like B+, A- marks so far. So they've been earning, you know, 70 to 80% of their bonus, and I think in so doing we've built community credibility. So that's important to maintaining projects of this magnitude. So just a quick wrap-up of where we are in terms of the timeline. Announcement of project in 2016. Notice to proceed to the contractor 2018, October 2018, and we got the job 25 to 30% done. And we're on schedule to be done in December 2022 with all of the important improvements that we've talked about. And one of the things that I'm proudest of, and again, this is modeling good behavior for all of the projects that are coming, is that, you know, on the 2nd Avenue Subway Phase 1, which happened, you know, was a great achievement, but happened just before I joined the MTA, they had 2,400 change orders. This project, which is a $2.5 billion project, so far has 20 change orders, and more than half of them are actually credits to the government where we pay less rather than more. So, you know, again, every project's going to have change orders. We shouldn't judge it just on the numbers because, especially in design build, there are conditions and situations that evolve. But I think it really speaks to the effective management of this project. John McCarthy's here to, along with his old friend Lisa Black, take a victory lap on all of the planning that went into. Who's not here is the guys who are running the job, which is a guy named Mark Rauch, a very soft-spoken Irishman with a very strong sense of how to run a good construction project, and some of his team. And they're really doing a great job. And the builders, frankly, the outfit that's doing it is an outfit called Third Track Construction, which is a combination of Halmar, who did the Post Avenue Bridge, and the international Spanish-based construction outfit Dragados, and a couple of other firms. And we have got them on lots of projects. And I have lots of old projects where we fight with them and we have lots of change orders. On this job, it really is high functioning. It's because of the caliber of the planning and the leadership by some of those people I mentioned. So congratulations to all of you who made it happen, and I hope we make good on your vision. Thanks.
Don't you have confidence in people like Jano, just hearing him talk? Really. And he said something really very calmly and in the middle of his remarks, but I want to just drive it home. He said this project is ahead of schedule and under budget. When do you ever hear that with big projects? Another big round of applause for Jano Lieber. Thank you. I forgot to mention earlier, we have so many people who were involved and so many people who showed leadership on this issue, including our elected officials like Laura Curran and Steve Ballone. And Angie Carpenter is in the audience too, our Islip Town supervisor. I wanted to thank Angie because she came out right early on to lend her support for that. So let's give her Angie Carpenter. I also forgot, I wanted to mention earlier, too, for everybody who will be celebrating, I wish everybody a Happy New Year next week for Rosh Hashanah that's starting on Monday. So hope you have a happy and holy week. And then finally, I also wanted to mention earlier that what was really neat about this project was the relationship with the business community and the labor community working together hand in hand. Again, it showed, just like with the Pine Barrens example, with the LIA and the Pine Barrens Society, my predecessor, Jim LaRocca, who I just actually had lunch with yesterday, and we were talking about that, showing that the business community and the labor community and the environmental community can all come together on important issues for our region. And so that's worthy of an applause, too, And now we have a terrific panel for you here today. You're really going to enjoy it. It's going to be moderated by Rita Cioli, and really appropriate because not only for her, helping and leading with some terrific editorials on the third track when we needed them most. On Monday will be the 4th anniversary of The Point, which if you don't subscribe to, you really should, because it's a terrific piece that comes out every day with some, really important items that are discussed. And so let's give Newsday a round of applause for The Point on their 4th anniversary. Rita began working in Newsday in 1972 as a summer intern during her senior year at Fordham University. She also worked full-time covering the Hempstead town. After graduating from Georgetown University, she returned to cover the courts and the legal beat. She spent almost a decade in Washington, bureau assigned to the U.S. Supreme Court, the Justice Department, and the FBI. She also did a long stint as a media and technology reporter, and then she also covered religion. Before joining the board in 2005, she became editor of the opinion section and the chair of the editorial board in 2007, and she's going to lead our distinguished panel. So let's give a nice big round of applause to Rita Cioli.
We're running a little bit behind, and I don't want to take up too much time because we really want to hear your questions too. But I must say, listening to Jano, really just this memory was flashing by, and I just have to tell you about it. I was a little girl. I grew up in Throgs Neck in the Bronx, where the bridge is now. When I grew up, there was no bridge. And Robert Moses put a bridge through. And we, as kids, would go down and watch them move the houses. It was a thing that you did. And I'm thinking, he's talking about community outreach, and there was so much anger, and there was no input when Moses just did what he had to do. And so that part, if you know the Bruckner interchange, that was a little roundabout with a Howard Johnson's, right? And I think someone actually wrote, I think the New York Times architecture critic wrote a book, Adelaide Huxtable, Will They Ever Finish the Bruckner Interchange? So then we had the pathway to the Throgs Neck Bridge. And stores were gone, homes were gone, friends were gone, and it was just a bulldozer coming through our neighborhood. So the contrast from the late 50s to what happens now is just stunning to me. And the best little part of it is a little Catholic school in the Bronx there, right at the water's edge. And Robert Moses wanted the kids to come out in their uniforms with pom-poms to line the route of the bridge as they took the first ride over it to open the bridge. And nuns being nuns said, sure, okay, we'll do that. And the parents said they just went up in revolt. And you never really see that happen in a Catholic school, but the parents said anything. And they said, no, we are not letting our kids do it. He destroyed our neighborhood. And so that was the sentiment. And now you have such a totally different, enlightened approach. And I think that's what makes this project so exciting. We're going to take it apart a little bit here, but it's already having a legacy. We see Monday the groundbreaking at Belmont. Some of the elements of this project were incorporated in that. Laura Curran's shepherding the hub through. She's already working on some of the lessons here on community advisory boards and getting all of that kind of input. And that's what we're going to need, I think, moving forward to get projects done. So I'm going to ask the panel to talk a little bit about their own experiences. But it's a very exciting time, and I want us to all kind of leave here with some energy and some enthusiasm about what are we going to do next, and how are we going to define it, and who's going to determine what we're going to do next, and how are we going to put this coalition back together in a different way. It'll never be one size fits all for every project, but there are so many truths that came out here that I think have to apply to anything we do next. So that said, I want to start with Nancy, and we'll have questions, but let's let the panelists talk a little bit about things. On the power of a foundation to convene, and I think that is one of the strengths we have here on Long Island. And Nancy saw that and said, let's try this. But I wondered, Nancy, what was your level of confidence at the time, back then, that this was actually going to be to get us to where we are today? How did you feel about it?
Confidence level was low. There was, and this, I have to give a lot of credit to the board of the foundation, too. They were willing to take risks. And we started, it all started with looking at other regions in the United States that were solving regional problems much better than we were. From Seattle to Chicago to Louisville, Kentucky, to where they actually merged a town and county government. So there were really amazing examples. So we got the go-ahead on Long Island that the only thing that made sense here was to do a research report. And that, when you talk about the power of convening, I do think that a foundation is seen as an objective agent, because what do we get out of it? We're doing something, we're trying to make something happen. So we used very consciously, based on other regions too, the power to convene. And we did that, and we had labor, environmentalists, business, nonprofits. And the one thing that came out of that was, in fact, people agreed we did not have a good scorecard on the region, indicators. And other regions were doing this. So that's how we got into that business. And from there, we went ahead. But we were cautious, and every year the board would decide, is this moving or not moving? Do we continue? And that was the good thing. We could stop the project. If we had really hired a nonprofit to do it, it wouldn't have been, we would have made obligations. And so that's what we did.
Dave, I want to go to you next. My mother always said, you make your own luck, right? It's just not happenstance that you got the governor buttonholed him and try to get him behind this. And he had to see a winning project before he was really going to do it. So tell us a little bit about what your pitch was at that moment. Where were you in the executive mansion, and how did you get a bell lit off in his mind to do this?
I got lucky. I learned as mayor that at public events, such as the event that I was at in Albany that the governor attended, you have an unusual opportunity to bypass the palace guard and catch the ear of an important public official from time to time. And I used that to my advantage when I was mayor in Greenport. And when I was invited to go up to the REDC announcements in Albany and was informed that there'd be a reception that the governor was throwing, I figured maybe I'd have an opportunity to talk to him. And so I placed myself in the right location. So he had to go by me in order to get where he wanted to go. And he likes to work the room. I mean, this is a governor who actually enjoys talking to people and engaging in conversation. And so I knew I'd get a chance to talk to him, and I did. And I introduced myself as a former mayor, which always creates a common ground with another elected official, even though, needless to say, there's a huge disparity in authority between a small town mayor and a governor of a state. But it's a common ground, and so, so what are you doing now? And I told him I was working with the Rauch Foundation. And so, really, what sorts of things are you working on? And that led into the discussion of the third track. And I have to tell you, I've given an enormous amount of thought to those. I don't know, it was less than 5 minutes that I had with him. We were surrounded by other people. But Governor Cuomo stops and he listens. Oftentimes when you find yourself in conversation with an important figure, they entertain you that they're listening to you, but you can see that it's going in one ear and out the other. Governor Cuomo stopped and he listened and he paid attention. And I'm eternally grateful that was the case, because it's had a big impact for us.
I was talking with Lisa Black, who at long time worked with the Republican Senate in Albany. I said, what made you want to get involved in this project? And she just laughed and she says, I was told to do it. But I think that says a little bit about, once you got the guy who could put the energy behind it, how it got pushed forward. So, Lisa, you want to tell us a little bit, you and John, in those early days of how you were tasked, what the governor told you to do, and how you went forward with it?
So, yes, we call it voluntold. We were voluntold to do it. We both had other full-time jobs, obviously. John should be up here with me, by the way. And everybody in the audience, by the way, there are so many champions of this project, and every one of them along the way helped us. So thank you for that. Don't they say that success has many fathers? In this case, they had a mother, too. So it was an interesting conversation. I got a call one day from the second floor. I had worked in the governor's New York City office, and they said, can you come upstairs? The governor wants to see you. I was like, oh, great. What did I do? And they said it was Robert Mujica and Rick Cotton in the room with the governor, and he said, you take the train to work, don't you? And I said, yes, I do. I live in Nassau County. I'm taking the train to work. And you're still working with the Republicans, right? And I said, well, I work for you. But yes, I communicate directly with them doing the intergov for you. And he said, okay, I got a new project. And then they went through it with me, and they said, how much time can you devote? And I looked and I said, well, how much time do I need to devote? And he was like, okay, good, you're on this tomorrow. And then I just, furiously went around and started reading whatever I could to learn about the train. And I have to tell you, at that period in my life, I was 38 or 9, up there. And it was the first time in my life I had ever had a commute to work. I never even drove to work before. I lived in the city. I worked at City Hall. I walked there. I lived in Albany. I walked to the Capitol. So it was amazing to me that they wanted to do something with the railroad, because I figured it worked already so well. But that's essentially how we got into it. And as soon as you get that call, it was the next day. The next day I had a meeting with Campanet.
Another key piece of the puzzle, and you'll see a lot of the pieces of the puzzle, finding the right people is so important to moving something ahead. And then the next thing, though, really is the leadership, and the leadership on the ground as well, not just from the big guy, but from everyone else. And I think Laura Curran could speak to that and Mayor Cavallaro about what it was to come out early and often and support this project at a time when no one really wanted to do it. So, Laura, as a legislator and then as a candidate for county executive, took a pretty bold move to say, I support this, right? What are the dynamics there? What was the reaction you got from people? Did they tell you, this is a political killer, don't do this? I mean, give us a little sense of how you found a space to advocate for the track.
Yes, I definitely got advice. Don't weigh in on this. You don't have the job. It doesn't make sense to put yourself out there and alienate people who don't even know you yet. You know, whole communities are not going to like you. They're not going to vote for you. But I have always thought, you know, as a normal person, back when I was a reporter, just a parent raising children in the suburbs, I always sort of fantasized about how the suburbs could be better. I moved from the city for the suburban quality of life, like so many people, but I remember taking the train to work from Baldwin, looking down at this huge square parking lot, and in my mind, you know, like with Legos in my mind, building it of how I thought it should look. And I didn't know at the time that was transit-oriented development, but that's what I was thinking. And, you know, I was reading, obviously, in the paper, hearing on the news about this project and the ups and the downs, and I have to say, Liz, you did a fantastic job writing this, and I recommend everyone reading it. It reads like a novel. It's very, very interesting. And there was one thing that really struck me that I just want to share, and I think it will resonate with everybody in this room. Arguments that seemed so compelling at regional business breakfasts suddenly seemed a lot less attractive in front of an audience of Long Island residents, of angry Long Island residents. So, you know, I think it was really important, and this is something that Mayor Cavallaro did, and so many people in this room, as Lisa said, going to those people, not letting those people who don't like it and have this misinformation about, you know, toxic waste from Brookhaven coming through their neighborhood, et cetera, standing up and speaking against that and talking about the benefits of it. And I just have to say, as I was reading this now, I'm reading it through the prism of what we're trying to get done at the hub. And the coalition with labor, you know, we have a developer in Scott Reckler, and Mike Maturo is here, that was very open to speaking with labor. We have a labor leader in Maddie Arasich that was very open to speaking with a developer. We also have a very wide-ranging community benefits advisory board with all of the surrounding communities. They have very vibrant and robust work groups. That's working well. And also, you got to work the politics of it, as everyone here knows. So I felt it was very important to speak with our legislature that needed to approve the development plan at the hub. I kept in constant contact with Rich Nicolella, who's the presiding officer, who happens to be of another party, of update so that we wouldn't have any problems there, and also working closely with the town of Hempstead. So it's all of those things together. But in answer to your question, I know that transit-oriented development is the key to the success of our county and of our region, of this island. So, you know, if I'm going to campaign, honestly, I'm going to come out and say what I think.
When you read the report, and you really should do that. It's an assignment. You're all you're here because you're players. You're here because you're insiders. You will learn things that you don't know. You will see it from a different focus, and you'll get a booklet on the way out, but also on Newsday's website, and we will have it in a very nice reader-friendly swipe kind of format, like as if you were reading that novel, and on our Next LI website, which is a project of the Newsday and the Rauch Foundation to start a conversation about Long Island. We are going to have a place there where we can talk and start to define and figure out what the next idea is. So the conversation is not going to end when we leave. It's going to keep on going on online. But Mayor Cavallaro turns out to be one of the heroes. If we had to get the characters in here, he would be a hero, and maybe in the movie he'll play himself, you know. But he was on the ground, out there often, and one of the only mayors at that time, the first and probably only one for a long time, to say this is what needs to be done. Now, tell us a little bit about how you said you realized your community had changed, and people with not the same mindset as 2005, and the mayors who were knee-jerking, opposing it, really weren't understanding the dynamics of what was happening on the island right now. So tell us a little bit about your thinking in saying, I'm going to come out for this. Tell us what you thought.
You know, my background, my personal background is as an attorney, but also as a business person. So as mayor, I try to look for opportunities. And when this was announced, I was obviously surprised, like a lot of people were. But I thought of it as an opportunity, not as a problem. And I felt that Eric Alexander, who's here, kind of sold me a long time ago on transit-oriented development and the needs for developing and redeveloping near your downtowns. And when this was announced, I felt it really fit into the puzzle perfectly, especially for my community. So looking at it as an opportunity, I was comfortable promoting that to my residents. As a local mayor, unlike the county executive, you know, I don't have to deal with a lot of the partisan aspects of it. And so as a local mayor, what you try to do is just say, well, what's the right thing for the community? Sometimes you try to think of the broader regional implications, and in this case, I just felt that the project, it was time for the project. I mean, Mayor Tweedy, former Mayor Tweedy, who's here in the audience, you know, he had a different point of view than I did, but I think that was an important approach that he took because I think it made the project better. But I think he would agree. What I would try to tell some of the other mayors is, in 20 years, there's going to be a third track. So I think if there's something that's inevitable, I think as a local elected official, you have to say to yourself, how do I work with the inevitable for the betterment of the community? And if there's a bigger regional benefit to that, then that's all gravy too. But as a local official, you know, you have to look and see, you know, how it's going to impact your community. I think there are a lot of people who are very important to the process, and we've heard from some of them already. I think the two most important people from on the ground level as a mayor were John and Lisa, because I can't imagine how many individual issues they had to deal with from all the different communities that were impacted by this. I just know from Westbury's standpoint, we probably had several hundred specific individual issues which were peculiar to our community that had to be dealt with. And I think the role that they played was so important because ultimately, even though maybe I was one of the mayors who was initially in support of it for my own reasons and for my community's reasons, all of the mayors on the main line ultimately supported it. And I think it was their efforts really that brought that process along. And when I spoke about Mayor Tweedy, you know, there were some mayors who had a different point of view on it. But I think that opposition to something can also be leadership. And I think that that was important because it did change the project. It did change some of the mitigation that was provided in the project. It did address these local concerns, probably thousands of them that Lisa and John had to deal with. So the approach that the other mayors took, even though, you know, it was different, I think it was also very important.
How often did you talk with Lisa and John, would you say, at the height of this?
More often than they would have liked to have had me talk to them, I'm sure. You know, during that time frame, it was very frequent. It was, you know, probably several times a week. Some of those conversations weren't pleasant. You know, even though I was supportive of the project, I mean, I think John and Lisa would say, I think as a community and as the mayor, I was also demanding. I knew there were certain things that we needed to get out of the project, and we took the opportunity to try to get those things. And so it was a dialogue that was, I wouldn't say daily, but definitely several times a week, and sometimes it was daily.
I think one of the things you'll see from the report, the key element of any of this is flexibility. And one of the great anecdotes that Liz captures of someone at, I think Floral Park was at a meeting saying, having an accessibility issue, and she was handicapped. And Liz says that very quietly after the meeting, Lisa went up, handed her the card, and said, let me work on this for you. Nobody knew anything. She got what she had, and she got it done. Now, granted, this $800 million of benefits kind of came out of all these demands along the way, and not every project is going to have a pot of money that can be free-flowing like this one had. But how important, Lisa, is that in being flexible and listening to people?
Well, I think it goes to just being a credible messenger. One thing John and I did when we first started this project was we read through, and I called him last night, and I said, what did we do? Remind me. I still, I got to remember, we were driving around in my state-issued vehicle, and that was our office. We had a printer in the back that had the capacity to print if we needed. It was amazing. We were a little two-man band. So anyhow, we, how important, I don't even know. Where was it?
I was just going to say,
Oh, yeah.
somebody's asking you for the world. This mayor wants this.
They all
This
want
mayor
the world.
wants that.
They all
want.
wanted the world.
How do you make that, put that together?
So what we did was we found out what the issues were from the last two projects, right? And we were like, all right, we know what we have to mitigate. We were educated on what the issues were. I might not have lived on that corridor, but I knew every firehouse along the route. And so you listen to them, you make them feel appreciated, you make them feel like their voice is heard. And it wasn't only making them feel it, their voice was heard. Every bit of that opposition, to Peter's credit, exactly right. It made the project better. This project needed sound attenuation. There is no doubt that you hear those bells and you hear that train and you feel that rumble from the train in everybody's backyard. And one thing they weren't asking for was sound attenuation. So how do you get that done? And thankfully, these brilliant engineers came up with this plan. So I wouldn't say it was a giveaway. It was really solidifying a project and making it better.
Again, labor has been mentioned before by Jano, and I also think that, in the report you'll see the role they played, but those last few months and weeks were really critical. The project approval of the project was caught up in very contentious Senate races on Long Island that we really could have determined control of the Senate. So all of a sudden now you had another monster element that had to be gotten around. And you'll see it really the work of labor getting not only through the whole project, but getting it over the finish line in those last few months and weeks was really critical. So Rob Mikuleff is here. He's with the New York State Laborers Organizing Fund. He told me they have 200 people on the job now. They expect 500 people to be working out of the Long Island track, out of their track project. And this is what they did. They had flyers everywhere, right? And Rob will give you more detail. And Lisa and John would talk to them, and they'd go back and forth. What do we need? There's going to be a demonstration here. We'll get out there with our truck. And they had an electronic truck with all the messages to be at the station at night when the commuters came off. They handed them flyers. They had an app to let them look at the project. And then they also create this great video. I think the next slide. There's no sound. This is Rob's imagination. He filmed this.
This is actually, I was stuck in traffic here. So this is me behind the wheel of my car dealing with, just the situation.
What crossing is this?
I believe that might have been, I think it was, Coverdale? Or, I think it was Covert. I mean, again, it was quite a while ago. But basically, this is like a before and after of what it would be. Or maybe it's not working.
What it is he made a little GIF, and you see this traffic, and then it segues beautifully into what it would be like when the underpass was there and everything was flowing. And it just told the message in a few seconds of your life is going to get better. It's not going to be this. It's going to be that. And it was a brilliant move. So Rob, tell us, how was labor received in this project? How was it working with everybody in the coalition? And I think Dave said that when the governor announced it, Vince Albanese called and said, we want to be part of it from day one or day two. And you guys really, really stayed with it. Do you know how much money you spent on this by any chance?
Oh, my God. I mean, I would say it's not even worth announcing like any sort of price or what the figure was. It really came down to our members. And just to give folks an idea, for the New York State laborers in Suffolk County, we have like almost 2,500 members, and in Nassau, almost 3,000. So these are men and women that work on these projects day and night. They're the people that you see on the side of the road trying to make our transportation better. So how could they not be involved in something like this when they haven't seen this kind of construction work really ever in Long Island, where they would have to either go to New Jersey or go into the city in order to find work? They could have this work literally in their backyard. So it didn't take much to convince our members at their membership meetings, at Christmas gatherings. We had flyers there passing them out. We had videos, promotional videos, to get them on board. So it was a very quick effort.
That was a year later. A year from Dave's conversation in the mansion, you have your union Christmas party, and they're ready to go. So holiday times have a lot. But it talks about personal relationships and ways of how you get people very involved when you have them together and lay out a plan.
I mean, it's really like when you have everybody in a room, whether it's at a membership meeting, a Christmas party, or even at the hearings, and you're seeing some of the NIMBYism happening there, it's up to us to change the narrative, to change how things used to be in Long Island and how they are now, where more people want to ride the train, and it's a different landscape. So the members there really, they drove it home in terms of describing the need for this project. And it was a daily effort, of course, with Newsday, and of course with our monthly meetings coming to the Long Island Association. I have to say, I miss a lot of you guys, working with you day in and day out. It's like a little bit of a reunion here. But I tell you, like, the momentum that we had from this project, even though there were some political dives and, walls that were being thrown up, we really came through. And I have to thank, honestly, the membership. I just created the media and content to get the message out there, but they drove it home.
Can I borrow?
The laborers also provided some extremely important people on the ground along the corridor as part of their contribution to the coalition. A couple of them are here today. Jim Sherry, Razy Cooper, and Mike Balboni were our eyes on the ground, our ears on the ground along that corridor to provide feedback to the coalition and to address specific obstacles when they would arise. Another person who provided important service to us was Jen Solomon, who's here somewhere in the room. When we needed, as this thing, this started out as a handshake, very informal. We really didn't know what we would need until we got into it, and we realized at some point we'd need some help with communications and with writing. And ABLI stepped up to the plate. Mark Hamer, Lorene Harris, and provided funding for Jen Solomon to join the coalition and help us with the outreach.
And I understand that outreach is still going on. Somebody from New Hyde Park complained this morning that their water was brown. So, and they have somebody to call, and somebody's addressing that. So it doesn't end once the project, starts. It's still happening.
One more piece I'd like to add, and that is that, I get a lot of credit for my conversation with the governor, but that would have come to nothing if it weren't for the backup that Kevin provided during the month of December. He literally sacrificed his holiday that December to provide the level of confidence that was necessary for the governor to take this. I mean, he was walking into a firefight, potentially. It didn't work out that way, thank God, but that was the worst case scenario. And if it hadn't been for Kevin's relationship with the governor, his incredible network across Long Island, and his ability to convene a room like this, we wouldn't have gotten the governor's ear.
Yeah. That's a well-deserved round of applause. I have my own little Kevin story. It was that August of 2015, Kevin and I used to have, August used to be the slow month, and not anymore. And we used to try to have lunch and kind of catch up and gossip and talk about things and see what the new year was going to lay out, what the agenda was going to be. And as we got up that time, was a Jewel right over here on 110, and he says, I got something really big that's going to happen. I can't tell you about it now. And I thought, you got to tell me. No, I can't tell you. But it's going to be, it's transformative. And I said, you got to tell me something. I can't leave here without you telling me what this is. And he says, we're going to revive the third track project. And I just went, oh. That's it? Okay. We've been down this road before. We're going to go down this road again. And so I was one of the first, to say, can't happen on Long Island. And now we're here with this kind of dynamic that we know we've turned the corner. So I'd like to do one more round with the panel, and then we'll get your questions on what could or should be the next new idea for Long Island. What is the takeaway from this? You've got the band back together. Labor now has a template. Community organizing has a template. But how do we get to the next project? Who decides what it is, and how does everybody coalesce around it? How do we make that happen? Because it would be a shame to lose this momentum. So I'm going to throw that out there to you guys. I don't know. Laura, you're working on the hub. So that's happening. There's, we have Belmont, we have the potential of Hicksville, which Eric has been working on since he was in toddler. He's been working on Hicksville since he was a toddler. That's around Conkerman to get over the finish line. There's affordable housing. Again, a huge regional issue, but very much, as Angie knows, located in your own community. What kind of template can we to do that? Should we talk about rising sea levels on our coast? We're an island. How are we going to deal with that long term? That's a big problem. Sustainable energy, renewable. You hear a lot of people come in and they talk about all these little projects. How do we have some kind of overlay for local governments and town governments to be looking at renewable projects to bring Long Island really into the next iteration of a modern suburb? How do we attract people to come here and stay here when we can show ourselves that we're a renewable community? How do we make that happen? So I'm going to turn it over to you guys and say, how do we find out where we need to go forward? How do we get that idea? Nancy's a big supporter of convening and discussing. But on the ground, tell me how you get that going, Laura.
I'll just jump in really quickly. I think that's something that we should all be focusing on is mixed income housing. It goes very well with transit-oriented development. At the county, we are about to release an RFP for studying last mile and first mile transit, micro-transit. What kind of pilot programs can we do to help people get around more easily? We are a very segregated region. It's just the truth. And I think mixed income housing is the way to make our communities more integrated. And there are some glimmers of hope. The town of Hempstead, Supervisor Laura Gillen and now former Councilwoman Erin King-Sweeney have convened a group, and I believe Eric Alexander is part of that, to look at zoning in the town of Hempstead with an eye to more density, which, if you know about the history of the town of Hempstead, that is a very large deal. The fact that these conversations are happening and people are talking about it openly gives me a lot of hope. You talk about green.
But what would you need as you and town supervisors and village mayors? What do they need now? And maybe, Peter, you can talk to this. How do you talked about housing too,
right.
Really critical.
Political
How
cover,
do we go forward?
Political cover is incredibly important, and something that in this report did, and the conversations that Lisa and John have had, and what everyone did was just getting granular with the communication, embracing the NIMBY people, talking to them respectfully, talking to them and taking them seriously about what their concerns were, to get the political cover to finally get that kind of zoning change done that I believe we need.
How do we make that regional? Nancy, how do we make this regional? That's the key, right? Do we come up with, these are all now housing, in many ways becomes very local decisions. Do we come up with different models? I know Angie was talking recently to us about a vacant elementary school that was just being used as the district's headquarters, business office, to turn that into senior housing, to people wanting to stay in their community and open up starter homes for people. Out in Southold, they're trying to find some kind of grants to people to have an accessory apartment built that would stay it has to be affordable, and you can get some money from the town as a grant that would be forgived to turn and there where density isn't going to go too far, turn those apartments into something. So every part of the island says they want affordable housing. How do we give them templates for what is the need in their particular?
Well, it's a tough one. We have. I'd like to hear what Bob Yarrow has to say about this too, because he spent his whole life thinking about this. But just from my perspective, I always look at what have other places done. Chicago, outside, well, in the city, but even into the suburbs, the business community actually said they would support housing projects and build. No, they would locate new offices within a half a mile of transportation, public transportation. Places like Silicon Valley, and this is for a county there too, or two counties, they actually put in work an expedited building permit for the entire region. I always thought that was terrific because then you can really specify some things that will be passed automatically based on your need. But, I mean, that's what comes to mind to me, that we've got to figure out some way, we've got to get the local cooperation, but we've got to build it into something bigger or we'll never go to scale. I don't know if you want to hear.
I just want to ask the mayor what he thinks.
I'll stick up for granularity here. I mean, as the mayor.
But what could a new coalition deliver to you to help you get housing?
Well, I'll get to it. I think, though, Eric has always made the point that, what makes Long Island special, and I agree with him, is that we are a region, but we are an eclectic mix of individual communities. And I think that through a lot, because of their work, I think Long Island has come to a place where you see a lot of communities now who are buying into the need for affordable housing. I think, just as an aside, I think maybe two projects, all the things you mentioned were good. I think the two projects that probably need the most focus are tax relief and our job creation, because you can build all the housing you want unless it's affordable to live here and unless there are good jobs that people are going to actually come and live here and work here, then I think that then it's really sort of a Pyrrhic victory. But I think the way you get there is by what the foundation does. I mean, the work that they do. You have to build a consensus. And I think Eric will tell you it probably took him, 15, 20 years to get to the point we are now on housing. But I think that by having these types of studies that are done by independent groups that don't have a political axe to grind or can't be really challenged in that respect, that gives local officials both the ammunition they need to go pitch these things and to sell them, but also I think, as I think the county executive said, political cover. That's an aspect of it which is unfortunate, but that's part of it. But I think the more study that's done on this, that solidifies the needs for these things and the impacts of these things, which are usually far less than the worst assumptions are, that's what local officials need, I think, to move some of these things forward, the big things forward.
You mentioned jobs, and again, it's so regrettable about the Amazon project being lost in Long Island City. But there, I think, if there was a ground game, if some of the models that we learned from this had been in place there, it might have had a different result. So it does. You could see the difference before and after of what really worked and what different. And that I don't think we're going to recapture that. But where are the new jobs and where are they going to come from? All right. So let's.
Rita, can I just interject? There is one regional thing that we've been talking about for years. We need a convention center on Long Island. And we have a proposal, perhaps, to bring it to Suffolk County, but it needs to be on Long Island, period. We can't be continuing to use hotels for convention space that is not perfect for convention space. We don't just need meeting rooms and cold chicken. We need sorry, you all know which space I'm talking about. But what we need is some entertainment and a recreational destination where we can actually engage out-of-towners, bring business people here from Monday through Thursday, and then hopefully use it on the weekends, just like Mike.
We have a regional airport. Wouldn't it be great to have something around there? Wouldn't that be think about that?
Such an
It doesn't
idea.
take hard to get from there to there. All right. So Nancy mentioned that Bob Yar is here. You want the first question, Bob? Why don't you want to kick off our Q&A? Or?
Yeah, can I jump in for 1 second?
Sure, Dave.
Sorry. The thing that made the third track project unique in some ways is that the Long Island Railroad is really the vascular system for Long Island. It transcends political jurisdiction. And there are other issues that have that same quality. For example, water quality. We have one aquifer under the entire island. Everybody's affected by what happens to our water. We have the same quality in the need to convert to renewable energy, which is a distribution system of wires that runs across every jurisdictional boundary on the island. These big picture items, I think, is where perhaps the coalition can be the most effective, because that's what we did. We brought together a regional perspective on something that would affect everybody. You get bogged down when you start to get localized. And so I think looking forward, we want to look for big challenges.
Okay. All right. Audience, any questions for the panel? All right. The gentleman right here in the front that nobody knows who he is.
John Cameron, Cameron Engineering, Chair of the Regional Planning Council. First of all, I'd like to salute leadership for a long time starts really as Peter said, in granular sense. Where at the villages, Dave, back in Greenport, was a leader, Paul Pontieri, and Patchard. Now they're what Peter's doing. They're seizing the opportunity of transit-oriented development, or at least on seizing the value of infrastructure. Paul Pontieri doing with regard to the sewers, etc. We all know we have challenges here on Long Island, but we also have opportunities. And I think, well, you hear government people say we're broke. We have no money to do anything. Local government has something that's more important than actually a bank account. It's zoning power. The county, with all due respect, the counties don't have that. The county's been leaders on vision and planning, etc. But you have the 96 villages, 13 towns that have zoning powers that can create economic development, working with private sector. Private sector, there's plenty of private money that's out there that can actually address a lot of our challenges, whether it's commercial, residential, etc. But you need local leadership, and you have a few great examples here of local leadership. If we don't have the local leadership, you're not going to get the public to get behind these projects. But I'd like to just hear a couple of comments. Dave goes way back, and Paul's been Peter's been a great leader in Westbury here too. I said, how do you get local leadership to get behind these projects?
Yes, the town supervisors and the village mayors control the zoning, and we are blessed on Long Island to have some very courageous mayors. Paul Pontieri, Peter Cavallero. I think of down on the South Shore, we have Fran Murray in Rockville Center. I mean, these are places that are becoming very vibrant. Mineola right now, Scott Strauss leading the charge there. Farmingdale, how could I forget? Be Still My Heart. Ralph Ekstrand, he is amazing, and he's putting forth right now before his village board an 100% workforce housing building. That's huge. That's a very big deal, and it takes a lot of courage, and it's not easy. I mean, I know you.
But how do we get, Laura? Let me interrupt. How do we help the Farmingdale mayor? How do the people in this room, even though it's local, what can everybody else do to try to explain that this is part of a whole? Do we need that kind of message that you now are pivotal to changing something?
Show up to the meetings, because it's the angry people that show up. The happy people or the people who don't care don't show up. So come to the meetings. And also, sometimes we have a bit of an elitist attitude towards the NIMBYs. Oh, they don't want anything. They hate everything. They don't want this. They don't want traffic. But you know what? There are real problems to these people, and I think that they, like you did, like Lisa did and John did and the whole crew, you listened to them, you took them seriously, and even when they were up in your face and yelling at you, you sort of got behind the emotion and listened to what the real concern was. People are afraid of change. People are afraid of traffic.
I'm just thinking, the wheels are spinning. Why not economic development analysis? Well, Patchogue before and after, Rockville Center before and after, Huntington before and after, right? And when Baldwin is getting to go, Hicksville, so people can see and you can quantify the data for them. This is what this actually could mean for you, and it's not just it's going to be too much noise for me.
And back to what Peter said, when you talk about economic development as a way of tax relief, that will speak to everyone, no matter what their politics.
Again, that's another very important point. That is defining the benefits, defining the project, and letting people be very clear about what the benefits are to it. And certainly when you start talking about taxes, everybody in the room looks up, and you can say, well, if we do this, we're going to have this much in our tax base for the town, and we can do whatever it is that you really want done. We don't have to raise taxes to pave the roads or build this park or whatever else the community wants. And I think that might be another way of making the argument.
Another thing is one of the big concerns that people have when they think about what's going to happen in their backyard or in their neighborhood is what's going to happen to their property value. And I think to the extent that we can help educate people on how property values have actually improved as a result of some of the things that we're talking about in terms of economic development and the provision of broad-based housing opportunity, I think it's really important. A case in point is in Greenport. Recently, there's an article in Realty Track that the Greenport, East Marion, and Orient are the 3 hottest property markets on Long Island now. And I think an argument could be made to some extent that that's a function of what happened in downtown Greenport, that the success of the business district radiated out, and it's improving everybody's property. That's a double-edged sword, because not everybody can afford to buy. But I think the whole question of sensitivity to property value is a really important
Again,
piece of the equation.
a great point. There you go, right there in the front row.
Elliot Conway, Mayor of Upper Brookville on the North Shore. I think I congratulate you on getting this done. It's really transformational. I think one follow-on project to consider is electrification of the railroad to Oyster Bay. I think that would be transformational for the North Shore and help reverse the exodus of residents for tax reasons. Attract millennials.
Oh, a great idea, electrification of all the lines, right? We're just the little pieces in the new capital plan, I think, on the Babylon branch, is it? I think the Central branch, right? But and let's bring in renewable energy.
Well, absolutely. We're looking at community solar in Upper
Put
Brookville.
solar along those tracks and let that electrify. Like, how do we get it beyond the MTA always comes in and oh, it's too expensive. It's so much a mile. I forget how much they say, like $9 million a mile to electrify something. And you say, that's the same number I've heard for the last 15 years. Have you ever gone back and tried it again and see what else you can do? And I think that's the kind of thing that we can push, electrify all of those lines. Sure.
I remember working on that project, electrification, to Oyster Bay, to Port Jefferson, to Ronkonkoma, and Spionk in the 1960s, consulting in a consulting engineering firm to the MTA. But today we're looking at it either as electrification or we stay diesel. And there are developments, mostly in Europe, Asia, and even in this country, but not around here, looking at other technologies. Battery electric. It's not just automated. It's not just battery cars, automobiles. Battery electric trains are running. Hydrogen fuel cell trains are running, being built and run. So I think we ought to look at those.
And so the MTA board member here.
Kevin?
That's what we want.
Thank
Okay.
you. It's just something that ought to be part of the mix.
Great
Thank you.
suggestion. Thank you. Okay. Elaine, we'll go with you, then you, and you.
Thank you. Elaine Gross, who Erase Racism. Rita, I think the question you were asking was... Thank you. I think the question you were asking was a little bit about the mechanics behind getting people to focus on these larger regional issues. And what I take away from what I've seen is that it made a difference that Kevin Law from the LIA, that Nancy DeZinis from Rauch, it made a difference that there were players that had a certain cachet and position on Long Island who felt that this was something they were willing to take a risk on, to stake their reputation on. And so I really have a question for them about what is it that would make you want to do that? Because we have a lot of very long-term embedded problems, structural problems. And people have raised a number of them. Another one that hasn't been raised yet relates to our very inequitable public school education system and our long-standing racial segregation. But what is it that allows an issue to be something that is seen as beneficial to the region in a way that will garner the attention and the resources, and really being willing to use, to use personal capital in order to make it work. Because we need to figure that out, and then more people will flock, perhaps to those issues.
I would say probably economic change from it would be one of the first things you might say, Kevin. And sometimes it's not so easy to see some of the more structural problems you're talking about, to see that right away, but that there probably is an overall benefit. But it's a really good question from Elaine.
Yeah, I think so.
We're going to get you to get behind.
Well, I think two things. Just like, I think Dave alluded to it before, we need to educate people how it might impact them, or impact the business, and financially. What it all comes down to is, how does it hurt my property, how does it help my property, how does it help my pocketbook? So one thing, I've been trying to do that for the last few years, and LIA is showing leadership in the area of child care. We need to make child care an economic development issue. It's not a woman's issue, it's not a family issue, it's an economic development issue, because businesses need affordable, good quality daycare to attract the workforce. Same thing, we've got the business community behind saving efforts to protect our groundwater and mine members, because we realize our environment is our economy. And for Elaine's question, and I've been using this lately in a lot of my speeches when I go out throughout Long Island, I think our demographics are a big challenge for us, or our changing demographics. And what I'm concerned about is what is our future workforce going to look like? What are they going to be? We always tout ourselves as a highly educated and highly trained workforce. Well, in terms of our demographics, the only segments of our population are growing are elderly population, not elderly, but 55 and over, and then a lot of growing in our minority communities. But our minority communities have high-cost, low-wealth school districts. And we should be concerned about that, like the business community should be concerned about that, because, well, if that's where we're going to be getting a lot of our future workers from those communities, well, what are we going to do about the way we fund education? Because a lot of folks in those communities don't get the same quality education because they don't have the same financial resources as, say, a Cold Spring Harbor or a Syosset, a school district. I'm not just picking on them, I'm just highlighting them. And so I think that's how we try to do it, showing how it's going to impact businesses, because how are we going to make sure our future workforce is as qualified and educated as our current and prior workforce.
Nancy, I think, wants to chime in on this.
Yes. Well, I mean, we ended up with a third track, but we were really, our original mission, it still is, and I think you know Elaine too, was to improve the lives of disadvantaged children on Long Island, and particularly through education. I could tell a lot of stories of things we did, but the structure of the separate school systems killed everything. We had the mother-child home program, known results, went into Hempstead, Westbury, Roosevelt, and Freeport. And it was a whole deal. We put the upfront money, the school districts had to pay a certain percentage. One by one, over a period of 6 years, each one dropped out. Because of why? What reason? Because of changing school board politics. So the system, and we have Lucinda here from BOCES, we also, I personally think a way to go at it is regional pre-K. You start with pre-K and you combine your districts. And then it becomes natural. You've got to start with young children, and there are ways we can do it. BOCES was interested, and it never quite worked, but yeah, well, I just think ultimately it's going to cost less, and that's the way we have to go. And again, it's going to need leadership, but it's not. The third track was so powerful and so regional, and it didn't have the related social issues. But I think, one success, that's the whole idea. Where do you go next? And we've got to get there.
I promised the gentleman in the back there, so go ahead.
Hi, my name's Dan from Long Island Survey. Couple issues that have come up sort of indirectly that I think might tie a lot of the same folks that were involved in the Right Track Coalition together that we've been excited to work on are sewers and offshore wind. And the mayor alluded to water quality, and I think that's something that affects Nassau, Suffolk County. So I guess I would ask the panelists just simply, do you think these are two issues where this might be able to be replicated?
Yes, sewers are a big thing, and we're not going to sewer all of the island. We know that, but there are other choices.
We only have 30% that's sewered, so we're well aware of that. But we worked with the Nature Conservancy. We did a little small piece of this in getting a referendum passed in 3 districts January. And thank you to labor, thank you to the environmentalists, thank you to the business community who came out and supported this because they know how important it is for economic development.
That was a very good coalition that you put together.
It was great, and it was a small scale, just $400 million. Nothing like $2.7 billion, I think we're at on third track. But if we can do that and keep these coalitions, I think it was one of the first times that in Suffolk County all those groups were actually together for the right purpose, for the same purpose, and for the same goal. And we have so much more to do. When we talk about offshore wind, we're consistently bothering Dave and Jen and, hey, can you guys come in and give us an update? And NYSERDA, where else do we need to go? Where do the landing places need to be? Where do the wires need to go? It's going to help help the county in I don't have to pave the road there next year, so I'm saving some money now. So, these are just getting everybody together in the same room for the same purpose. It doesn't happen often, but it should happen more often.
I think showing Long Island as being the forefront of being sustainable and environmentally aware is going to bring young people here, people who want to start their families here, because that's the life they expect, and that's the environment they want to be in. So you also can create that. There's another benefit, I think, to that as well.
I think that the opportunities in offshore wind and also in dealing with water quality are both provide tremendous economic opportunity. Offshore wind is literally it's a modern day gold rush, in terms of being able to fill the supply chain needs. It's a fast evolving new industry that's essential to our future, but with it comes a tremendous opportunity for employment. And the same is true of water quality. In Suffolk County, aside from the sewer installations, there's this push for more effective septic systems. Those are jobs.
Somebody else had a question. All right, Bob, you have gentleman there in the yellow tie.
Yes, hi. My name is Tom Streety. I'm the former mayor of Florida.
Okay, Tom.
And I feel I have to
Okay.
A lot of what happened, what was perhaps the first opposition to the MTA's plan was the elevation that happened in 1962. And Floral Park really opened up Long Island, as there were 9 grade crossings that went through Floral Park. Over 60 homes were demolished, and most of our downtown, which were transit-oriented housing, were demolished in our downtown. It took decades for Floral Park to recover from that. So when the first iteration came, which was just a slice through the middle, we were very, very concerned. When the second iteration came about, the governor's plan, I was at the time the mayor, and we wrote a letter which had 8 points. Not points of what we want for mitigation, but 8 points as we had studied the railroad, of what might be operational benefits that could be phased in over time. 8 mayors, including Peter, myself, and 6 other mayors signed that. We went into the city for a meeting with the governor, and speaking to what Dave said and what was said earlier about the governor listening. Many of these operational that we spoke about were not just regarding the third track, but they were all incorporated. Most of them were incorporated into the third track. And like Peter said, it wasn't a case of picking off each of the communities, which was a criticism. That wasn't it. It was Lisa and John listening to the communities, listening to what their unique needs were, and then addressing them. And I think that made this, again, the listening, the incorporation of the eclectic needs of each of those communities was heard by the third track, and I think that made a big difference. My only proviso at the end would be, those communities that bore the burden will get some benefit from this project. My hope is that there will be intra-island commuting from Floral Park, that a nurse can get on at Floral Park and go to Winthrop, not have to go back to Jamaica and do the same thing. So that would be, that intra-island has to be part of what this final project is. But it's, the 3TC is doing what they said they were going to do, and they're getting A's in Floral Park. So I just want to let people know. Thank you.
We're going to give the last question to Bob Yarrow. We're talking here about Regional Plan Association. He's been watching us for a long time. So you give us a wrap-up, Bob.
Thank you. Well, first, and again, I'm formerly Regional Plan Association, so I'm now just a professor, and I've also been working on a proposal to build a high-speed rail link between Manhattan and Boston with a preferred alignment that would actually run east on Long Island and serve Long Island, cut travel times, dramatically expand both commuting opportunities but economic opportunities. And I'll go back to this. I used to think of Long Island, there's a competition between Connecticut and Long Island as to which was going to become the America's largest cul-de-sac, and the competition continues. And but I guess an off-islander, I'm not a Long Islander, although I grew up here and I've watched the place grow. I would argue that there are three existential threats to the future of this island, and the first one is climate change and sea level rise. John Cameron and I have been part of a working group that's been looking at regional approaches to preventing the kind of flooding that accompanied Sandy that would protect the whole south side of the island, and that needs your attention, deserves your attention. Second thing is the continuing run-up in housing prices and the related problem of segregation by income and race and so forth. And as Nancy said, there are communities and regions across the country that everyone's wrestling with it. Some places are making real progress, and there's some lessons learned from that. The third one is congestion. The third track is a really important step in creating new capacity on the railroad in both directions. But it's not the only thing that needs to happen, and these are challenges that face every big metro in the country. The successful places are going to be the places that address them. And the last thought is just that a remarkable coalition that Nancy and David and the Long Island Association convened. I hope that you build on it. I was thinking, Winston Churchill was asked by someone right after Dunkirk, what do we do now? And his response was, keep buggering on. And so I would urge you to build on the success and the coalition building that you've done and the confidence that you've developed in Long Island's ability to address these big issues, to keep buggering on, take on the next big challenges. Thank you.
I think we had a lot of good ideas right here in the last 20 minutes that we can work on. And I want to introduce some of our next Long Island team. Coralie St. Louis is our engagement manager, community engagement manager. And Amanda Facina is our project manager. And we invite you to go to the NextLI website. You can find it through newsday.com or nextli.com. And we are going to have the study up, and we're going to put other ancillary pieces up, and we want there to continue this conversation, a really good, intelligent, smart conversation to see if we can start to define where it is that we want to go next, and whether there's one piece that can pull through all of these. Would a state income tax to fund our schools change the cost factor a lot? How would that change? How would that help us change school districts? There's lots of big ideas out there that we can think about how we want to get behind, and we have to keep moving. And I think let's keep this energy and excitement going. It's really been a special time. So I thank Kevin for the mic, and I thank our panelists. They were just great. Thank you.
Great job. Let's give another round of applause to Rita Cioli. You did a great job moderating the panel. Two last things. As Alicia said before, victory and success as one person, an entity involved for the last 20 years. So we had the information. Railroad, who did a great job. Yeah. So the book, on your way out, make sure you grab one of Liz Moore's best-selling novels. It's going to be on the New York Times best-selling list next week. And again, thank you so much for coming. Thanks for the panel. Thanks to Nancy Rauch D'Zinis. And again, Happy New Year to all those who are celebrating.